Hello guys. So I am going to go out after this, and as you can see I'm wearing my stripy weekend t-shirt, and I just took my shower. And when I was in the shower I had an inspiration. I usually get inspiration whenever I am at the shower, although most of the time those inspirations were wasted. But this time it was not, because I got an inspiration to talk about this book. So that inspiration is now converted into a YouTube video. Wow. Anyway, I was just sort of interested to talk about this book because I like this book. This is Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. This is my first Elizabeth Strout novel. It is a collection of 13 short stories that are interconnected with one another, and all of those stories would feature this one particular character named, obviously, Olive Kitteridge. Now, Olive Kitteridge, she is a retired school teacher who lives in this fictional American town of Crosby in Maine, and she lives with her husband, and earlier with her son. Her husband's name is Henry and her son's name is Christopher, and later when her son is a bit older and gets married, her son moves out. And so we sort of just kind of see the stories in which Olive Kitteridge appears in her 70s, and also the time when sometime I would say 10 to 20 years prior to that also. And basically all of the short stories here feature appearances of Olive Kitteridge. In some of the stories she is the main protagonist, while in some of the stories she just sort of appears as a cameo in some other character's flashback scene. So yeah, that was really interesting, and I really like the structure, but I'm gonna talk about that structure later, because first I would like to go very superficial. Okay, let's talk about this cover. For those of you who have read this book, or for those of you who know about what this book is, who know what this book is about, or for those of you who have just learned what this book was about, just learned who Olive Kitteridge was, you're probably going to be equally perplexed as I am by this cover. Basically, this is frankly a sexy cover, which is very, very strange, because we're talking about a book that contains stories that revolves around a retired school teacher, and we have this kind of cover. And it looks to me like a cover of a romance, maybe a vampire romance. Obviously those things don't really appear in this book. I mean, we do have relationship dramas in this book, but not exactly something I would call outright a romance. So it's really, really strange. Like, I don't really understand why this edition has this cover. Like, who decided on this image as the cover? Now, at least the back of this book, it looks a little bit better. I guess it has images of rocks at the beach. That makes sense. This one, it's just so strange. Anyway, yeah, that's really strange. It's just so hilarious. Enough about the cover of this book. So, back to what I like about this book. First of all, the narrative structure of this book. So basically, all 13 short stories in this book, they are not arranged in any particular order. They are not arranged in chronological order as well. It's just sort of jumped around between time periods, and and they all just sort of about, the main points of all of those stories just pretty much about different things. So they all can actually stand alone. Like if I were to take any story from this book and would to just give it to another person to read, that person would totally be able to just enjoy that story without having to know about other stories in this book, because I think that's what's special about it. One of the special things about the stories in this book is that they all can stand alone. You don't really need knowledge on any characters who will appear or who will appear in other stories. So that is great. But like I said earlier, all of these stories feature Olive Kitteridge in some capacity or another. And what's really interesting is that, every appearance of Olive Kitteridge in this book, in each of the stories, it presents to us an aspect of Olive Kitteridge as a person. Now, certain stories in which Olive Kitteridge is the main protagonist, of course, we are going to get more of who Olive Kitteridge is. Like, we see a bigger image of how Olive Kitteridge operates as a person. And for stories in which Olive Kitteridge appears just as a cameo, we just see sort of like a very small part of her. But what I find really really fun about this is that it feels like we're playing this kind of puzzle, and each of the stories would offer us like a piece, maybe a small piece or a big piece, but a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. And at the end of this whole novel, we end up with all of these pieces, and we can actually mentally join them together, and it would end up forming like this image of an actual person. Even though some of the individual pieces that we get from each stories feels like probably contradictory with one another, but at the end they just sort of words, when combined together. And I find that really interesting, because at the end of this book we end up getting to know this one person, this one character, Olive Kitteridge, as if we have just read like a long, continuous, full-length narrative of her. So I think that's really fun. And from there we sort of learned that Olive Kitteridge is actually someone who is quite abrasive. I think that's her trademark. You're going to see a lot of that in this book. She is very abrasive. She is very blunt. She's a bit of a... she's very irritable. Like, she is really honest. She literally just says whatever she wants to say without filters. I wouldn't go as far as saying that she's misanthropic, but maybe she has a little bit of that misanthropic elements in there. But she's not exactly that, because at the same time, despite all of these sort of like cheeky flows, we also learn that Olive Kitteridge is someone who is perceptive, someone who is actually quite sympathetic to people around her. She's able to see what are the things that people are sort of like hiding from the outside world. She's able to see if another person is dealing with some kind of trouble, and she's able to sympathize with them, and she is able to sort of channel some sort of emotional support to those people. And it is because of this kind of like contradictory personalities that we're seeing in Olive Kitteridge that I feel that, because each story only shows us like a limited aspect of who she is as a person. So as you go through each story, right, from the beginning to the end, sometimes it can be quite surprising because, say for example, when you just read like 3 stories and you already have like this sort of initial conception on who Olive Kitteridge is as a person, when you get to the next story, you may end up seeing a surprising and sort of novel side of Olive Kitteridge, like someone who feels like totally different, and you would feel surprised by that. And I really like that feeling because again, the pieces that you get, the pieces of Olive as a person that you get in the next story might be a piece that feels sort of jarring at first because it's different, but when you put them together, they all work, they all form a person. But yeah, I think that's another fun part about this book, is that when you move on to the next story, you never know what kind of personality, what kind of things Olive would say. Maybe she would be mean to some other people, or maybe she would suddenly become like really supportive of another person. That's sort of like the highlight of this book. Some characters in this book view Olive as someone who is very controlling, very mean, someone they just really dislike. Meanwhile, some of the characters in this book actually had their lives positively impacted by what Olive does to them or what Olive says to them. So I think this whole thing is just the combination of all of these stories. It just feels like it all comes together at the end. And I think that the narrative structure is so wonderful. It is definitely not original, like a lot of other books also have this sort of like interconnected short stories kind of a structure, but I feel like it really works in this book. It is really enjoyable to read. Okay, so the next thing that I really like about this book is I really like the way that this book talks about mental illness. And personally though, I am actually a little bit surprised, or maybe not, I don't know, that this book is not exactly like featured in any of the lists about books that people have to read when they want to know more about fiction that people have to read when they want to read more stories about mental health or mental illness, because I feel that this book, it really highlights a plethora of mental conditions, and I like that. But I also like, and this is what really makes me feel like really fond of this book, is how this book treats mental conditions. One thing I notice is that this book does not go out of its way to declare a character has this particular condition, or a character has that particular condition. It doesn't say that, hey, this character is an alcoholic in a sentence, but rather it just shows us what this character is doing. Maybe the character is drinking a lot, like before work and after work, and at the same time she's dealing with like so many things in the background with her family and with her affairs and with her relationships, and in the meantime she drinks a lot. But it doesn't say that this character is an alcoholic. I like that because it's not subtle. It's definitely not subtle, and we can literally see it. But it is also not on the nose. It doesn't try to be like, hey, I'm a book about mental illness. No. But it talks a lot about different kinds of mental conditions. It refers to so many different kinds of mental conditions. The main character, for example, Olive herself, seems to have, at least from what we read, depression, and she's constantly irritable. She's also quite pessimistic. She also has suicidal tendencies, but the thing is, this novel, I think, if I recall correctly, has never, ever, like, declared in any sentence that, and say something like Olive Kitteridge has depression. It doesn't say anything like that. But when you read it, and you can feel it, because you see what she does, you see what she says, you hear what she thinks, and you can sort of deduce that, and it's not just a flippant or a light kind of depression. It's like a real kind of depression. It's like it feels like a clinical kind of depression. It's major, so you can sense it. And because this book does not say that she has depression by outrightly declaring it, but rather just showing us, I feel that it's very humanizing. And when we see Olive Kitteridge saying things that are probably like really mean, we can sort of understand why she says those things. I mean, we can probably think that, yeah, what she says is mean, and we can certainly think that it's wrong to say those things, but at the same time we can also empathize and understand why, what drives her at that particular moment. And I think that's wonderful. There is one story in this book in which she steals a bra. I think that's really amusing, and it's totally random, but I really like the way that this story pretty much explores the thought processes that are happening inside Olive's mind that leads her to towards that action. I mean, that's just sort of like one of the examples is in how this story explores motivation very well, and how it sort of connects with a person's state of mind and what's happening around them, their environment. So aside from that, this book, and while we're at this topic, I would just sort of want to say that if you are triggered by mental health and topics of mental illness, consider this as a trigger warning, because it also mentions, aside from depression and alcoholism, it also makes references to and mentions kleptomania, arson, also self-harm, suicide, basically mental health conditions and mental illnesses as a whole. Consider that as a trigger warning. But the ones that I just mentioned earlier, all of those topics are also kind of explored in this book as well. But those characters, they appear to us as someone who are driven by something, and not just someone who sort of just appears on the page and the narrator just sort of say, hey, this is a character that has this particular condition, and that's it. No, it doesn't do that. And I think that's one of the beauty of this book. So with that, I'm gonna end this video about Olive Kitteridge. I really like this book, and there is a sequel called Olive Again, which I actually saw at the bookstore one time, but I think the next time I visited that bookstore, it was gone. So maybe some other time. But I'm really interested to read Olive Again, because I feel like the structure is going to be the same, I think, which means that we are going to get even more like puzzle pieces on who Olive Kitteridge is as a human, and so we're going to see more elements of that, more pieces for our puzzle, and I think it's going to be quite exciting as well. I mean, exciting is a weird word, right? But I think it's apt. I did feel excited about this book. I gave it 4 stars, but mostly just because it's a short story collection, and so some stories are like wow, and other stories are a little bit okay. They're not bad, but they're just not exactly something that spoke to me, but yeah, with that, I'm going to end this video, and I'll see you again in a different one. But hey, if you have read this book, let me know what you think about it. What's your favorite story? Most favorite story? Mine would be A Little Burst, because that's the story in which Olive steals the bra and later on says she wants to get some donuts. Because I forgot to mention, this book actually gave me a serious craving for donuts. Yeah. Just in case you're very susceptible to food cravings while reading this book gave me donut cravings. I actually got some donuts right after reading, right after finishing this book. So it was real. It was real. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you again next time. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Bye bye.